We are now in lecture 15 about Aristotle's Nicomachean Ethics. And here we're going to discuss the second part of the soul, which is desiring. We're also going to discuss the third part of the soul, which is thinking. And we're going to discuss two exemplary virtues to illustrate the virtue of desiring, and those are self-control and temperance. The desiring part of the soul is responsible for and is the source of motion of all actions that we undertake in pursuit of some object of pleasure or in avoidance of some object of pain. These actions are by choice or can be by choice, and such choice may be guided by rational thinking or not. For example, I choose to write or read this text right now in order to complete this discussion of Aristotle, in order to make clearer to others as well as to myself how Aristotle can help us think about who we are, our goals, and the good life. I could also instead choose to go to sleep or spend time with my friends or family. And not every moment of my action is by conscious choice, but it can be. My rational thinking advises me to push forward with this text, and I can choose to act accordingly, or I can choose to act contrary to my rational thinking and meet with a friend or family or simply go to sleep instead. That would be the difference in two different kinds of desire that I may have in my soul. This part of the soul, desire, participates in reason insofar as it hears the voice of guiding reason and can comply, but insofar as it can also refuse to act according to the guidance of reason, it participates in non-reason in some way. Thus, desire is both rational and not rational. Perhaps one part of it is rational and the other part is not rational. And the ethical task would then be to grow that part of desire, which is aligned with reason. To the extent that desire can hear and follow reason, it is capable of virtue. When desire follows reason, there is virtue in the soul. The more the desire is such that it follows reason, the greater is the virtue of desire. In other words, desire is this capacity in ourselves which we can shape. And the more we shape it to be accordant with reason, the greater is the virtue of that part of the soul which is desire, and the greater is the virtue of the soul as a whole, and hence the greater is the happiness. Aristotle here introduces a difference between two kinds of desire: self-control and temperance. These are actually two different virtues of desire. A person in whom a part of desire is significantly not aligned with and even fights reason, but nevertheless chooses according to reason, because another part of desire is aligned with reason, has and exercises the virtue of self-control. For example, if rational thinking advises me to write or read this text, but I really don't want to and instead want to spend time with a friend right now, yet I nevertheless choose to stay and write this text, then I have and exercise the virtue of self-control. I overpowered my desire by my desire, perhaps two different parts of desire. On the other hand, a person in whom desire is aligned and harmonious with reason, and thus chooses according to reason all on its own, has and exercises the virtue of temperance. For example, if rational thinking advises me to write or read this text, and that is what I really want to do right now, and thus choose to do it, then I have and exercise the virtue of temperance. There are a number of comments that we can make at this point. 1. A person with very little virtue of desire is not much happy at all. They don't follow the guidance of reason and knowledge in their life. A person with self-control, on the other hand, is person than happier than a person with little virtue, right? This is the person that overpowers themselves and they follow reason after all. But the happiest person here is one with the virtue of temperance, the one that doesn't have to overpower themselves but acts rationally because they desire to act rationally. And then the task of ethics, of course, becomes how does one become that kind of a person, the temperate person? Second conclusion is that it is clear that a person who lives their life according to rational thinking makes wiser decisions and accomplishes more in their life. But it seems that Aristotle's point, in the main, and in addition to the previous point, is that the soul of the person works better and properly. And that is what happiness is, in the main, apart from their greater accomplishments and wiser decisions in the world. So, happiness, the good life, is just having the good soul in which desire is aligned with reason, much more so than whatever may be the actions and consequences of such a soul in the world, Aristotle would like to suggest. Happiness seems to be the harmonious working of the human soul, in which all of the parts are facilitating and empowering each other's functions, by each part performing its own proper function well, according to its own nature and the nature of the soul as a whole. The nature of the soul as a whole is to aim at happiness by that soul be working harmoniously. That means that the nature of reason is to lead by knowledge the soul, and the nature of desire is to comply, or better yet, be aligned with what reason commands and how it guides. On the other hand, a person who has conflict in the soul, even if they manage with a lot of effort to overcome that conflict and do what is best, is not what we mean by a happy person and is not the happiness that we strive to achieve. The thinking part of the soul, finally, we get to the third part of the soul. The thinking part of the soul is responsible for all learning, knowledge, and rationally informed guidance, and is the source of motion of all action that is informed by learning and knowing, to the extent the desiring part of the soul enables the soul to choose according to what knowledge and understanding offer. The rational part of the soul has its own appropriate virtue, excellence of learning, knowing, and guidance, and participates, together with the desiring part, in the virtue of the human soul as a whole.